In this episode of the Mind's Eye podcast, join host, Paul James Caiden, and special guest, Clint Heacock, as they continue to discuss evangelicalism, divine truth, or man-made religion. Are you ready to open the eyes of your mind?
Greetings, one and all, and welcome to the Mind's Eye podcast. I'm Paul James Caiden, and joining me once again on the show is Mr. Clint Heacock of the Mind Shift podcast. And we are going to continue our discussion on evangelicalism, divine truth, or man-made religion. And we're going to delve a little bit deeper in today's show into the subject of dominion theology, and talk a little bit about what this has to do with what we've seen recently in the United States with the 2020 elections, with what many call the Trump prophecies. Why are so many evangelicals gathering around President Donald Trump? Why are they making these offbeat prophecies about him? Many in the evangelical community tout Donald Trump as almost this savior figure who's going to save the nation, make America great again, bring God, back into our country and make us a Christian nation. Is this just a religious notion, or is there something else behind this movement that most people are unaware of? So, Clint, you've done several shows, I believe, on the Mind Shift podcast about dominion theology. Delve into this for us and tell us what is dominion theology once again, and what does all this have to do with what we're seeing with the evangelical community around Donald Trump?
Well, there's so much to talk about. How much time do we have? Actually, yeah, I've done 2 episodes on this, and I've actually got a third one coming out on Sunday, the 22nd of November. So if people want to listen to those, they can look me up and look up those episodes. But I got on this pretty quickly right away because I've been researching these guys for about a year now, the sort of charismatic side of the what we call Seven Mountains Mandate Dominion theology. The guys like Kenneth Copeland, George Pearsons, Paula White Cain, who's of course Trump's spiritual advisor. These are some of the names that people might know that are more famous, sort of charismatic, prophetic types. And so almost to a person, all these people, there's loads of them, they predicted weeks and months and even years ago that Trump was going to win this election, and some said by a landslide even. And they were absolutely confident. Of course, they've been pro-Trump cheerleaders the whole time that he's been president. And these are the ones that have talked about Donald Trump is sort of a Cyrus figure. He's like a King David. He was prophesied to win in 2016. These guys have made a good living for the last 4 years, going all over the country, telling anyone who will listen to them that they foresaw Trump winning in 2016 and again in 2020. So they've set themselves up in this very, kind of interesting position, because now that it looks like he's definitely lost and Biden has won the election, now they're all scrambling to justify, to explain away the fact that their prophecies are utterly 100% wrong. And they claim to speak for God, who in their view is omniscient, omnipresent. He knows the future. They're the mouthpieces for God. So they've all completely gotten it wrong. And according to the Bible, a false prophet should be stoned, should be put to death. So that's the Old Testament law anyway. So the Bible has a very dim view of false prophets. So these guys are all scrambling and flailing to try and explain it all the way, and to sort of dampen the sense of cognitive dissonance that I think they must be feeling, because they're going, whoa, am I a false prophet? Well, how do I justify all this? So it's really fascinating to watch this whole thing play out.
It is a lot of big names out there that have made these predictions.
Oh yeah.
And it's one of those things that I tell people, again, whatever your spiritual path may be, be a little discerning about this. Don't be so led by the nose. Before Donald Trump was even elected, and I forget the guy's name who wrote the book, The Trump Prophecies, and they made a movie out of it. I believe he was a
Yeah,
fireman.
Mark Taylor, I think his name is.
Yeah,
They made
yeah.
it, yeah, Liberty University, Jerry Falwell's, well, former President Jerry Falwell Jr., his university made the movie, The Trump Prophecies. And there's another guy, Dr. Lance Wall now, who's gone around writing books, Trump, God's chaos candidate, and Trump is the
hmm
Cyrus figure. So, yeah, these people have been at it for the whole 4 years and maybe more even.
I know. But when I first saw that, the Trump prophecies, uh, something didn't feel right to me about it. I said, man, this doesn't seem like it's from God. It doesn't feel like it's from, divine spirit. It doesn't feel like it's from anywhere good. I
Hmm.
think this is going to get really weird, and it did,
Oh,
you
yeah,
know, and I,
very quickly.
and yeah, very, very quickly. And I can't believe there's so many people, Christians who are that undiscerning. They don't stop and pause and say, how do I feel about this? Does this feel right to me? Or am I just following the big voices that keep saying, oh, he's King Cyrus, he's King David, he's the
Mhm.
Trump of God? All of that stuff was so bizarre to me and it felt so wrong. And I'm not saying I know better than everybody else or I'm a prophet, but I just had that intuition. This is bad news.
Mhm.
And man, was it, you know?
Absolutely. But if you look at it from the point of view of this dominion theology, which we talked about in the last episode, their goal is to gain and maintain political power. That's what they see as taking dominion, certainly over America, and they're working on the rest of the world too. And in their view, the reason why Trump is so important, I believe, in this whole construct is that they believe he is helping them to achieve dominion because he's had all these evangelicals in and around the White House his whole presidency. They look at it as it's a win. It's a win-win. So that's what they see it as. They see it as God helping them through Trump. So he's almost like a savior figure, and that's why they say he's a Cyrus, because in the Old Testament Cyrus was the king of Persia who God supposedly miraculously appointed to take the Jews out of captivity and back to their homeland. So they looked at it as we had 8 years of captivity under the Obama administration, this liberal administration. Now, here's our savior, Trump. He's going to take us out and lead us into the promised land of dominion over the world.
Mhm. Yeah. And one of the things for me that I was going to mention in the last podcast that really kind of started souring me against evangelical Christianity was the out and out dishonesty and lies that these people told in
Mm-hmm.
order to substantiate their religion or make you think you had the truth. And
Mm.
these were pastors, these were doctors of the church, these were scholars, these were theologians, saying all kind of things that they definitively found, the ruins of Sodom and Gomorrah and Noah's Ark and this and that, and deliberately, changing up, actual Christian history to fit what they were teaching. I mean, there were just so many things. And once I found that one little thread and said, hey, wait a minute, I thought this was supposed to be an absolute truth, kind of the bedrock that we're basing our faith on. And I tugged at that string a little bit and I found another lie, another
Mm.
inconsistency, another warping of history and warping of the facts. And I say that related to this situation because with Donald Trump and all these Christians and evangelicals that are around him, how can we believe what they are saying? For example, look at his attitude, look at the things that he has said.
Mm-hmm.
He's a very, very arrogant, very almost sociopathic individual who just writes off anything that anybody has to say that disagrees with him.
Mm-hmm.
He makes fun of them. He bashes them. He
Yeah,
fires
bullies.
them. Yeah, he bullies. He's even quoted as saying, and I forgot what the source was, but it was around for a while where told one person about Christians, and he said, I don't believe that anybody could believe that crap.
Hmm.
You know,
Oh yeah,
so
that's not the word
so
he used. He told Michael
yeah,
Cohen that. Yeah.
yeah,
How do these
yeah,
evangelicals
definitely.
believe this BS? I think is what he actually said.
Yes. And then we have Paula White, his spiritual advisor, saying, "Oh, she's known Donald Trump for all these years, and he's always watched her show. And the first time that he talked to her, he quoted like three of her sermons
Mm,
verbatim back to her. And he's such a godly man. How do we know that's true?
exactly.
And I don't think it is. And I'm not picking on anybody, but look at the man's, look at his character, look at his mentality, look at the things that he says and he does. Do you think he's going to have, uh, the capacity to call Paula White and speak verbatim like he has, that what do they call it? The photographic memory where you can memorize things,
Hmm.
and spit out a sermon, 30 to 60 minute sermon, three of them in a row, verbatim, that
Yeah.
she, preached in the past. I don't buy that.
Yep.
And Kenneth Copeland saying, oh, the man, before he was president, all he ever watched was Christian TV and read the Bible. He never watched anything else. Again, I don't believe that. You know, it, it
Mm.
it just seems and it feels like an out and out lie. So if these people have pulled the wool over our eyes or tried to pull the wool over our eyes in the past with all of their changing of the facts to meet their needs, what's to say they're not doing it now?
Sure. They have no credibility. Well, according to
No.
Michael Cohen, if you read, I read his book Disloyal, and he does mention that Paula White does have a long-standing relationship with Donald Trump. I think her and her then husband had a condo in Trump Tower in New York going back like 16 years ago, and they did meet and talked a lot. And Trump admires Paula White because he kind of sees that she's a grifter like him, so he's like, man, you've got a great scam going, so that's how Michael Cohen saw it, was that Trump admired her and other prosperity gospel preachers because he was like, you guys have come up with the greatest scheme ever to make money, just selling religion, man, selling prosperity. It's brilliant. So as a businessman, Trump recognizes that kind of con man grifter side of their whole, shtick.
And not to mention, if he wants to move in on women like a bitch,
Yeah,
his his words, not mine.
he could do it.
I wouldn't doubt that he tried to move in on her, because she wasn't a bad looking woman,
Yeah.
in the day.
She's had a
So,
lot of plastic surgery, but yeah, but exactly
yeah,
right. I mean, I was going to say those two names that you mentioned, Kenneth Copeland and Paula White Cain, right now, those are probably the two names that most people are aware of because of a lot of the videos that have gone viral in the last couple of weeks, where Paula White was delivering this just bizarre, ranting sermon. I think it was just a day or so after the election day. And she was just speaking in tongues and saying all this bizarre stuff about angels being dispatched from Africa and South America to overturn the election results. And of course, Kenneth Copeland, there was a service just the other day where he just was laughing absolutely maniacally, leading his congregation supposedly to laugh away the fact that Biden has won. And of course, months ago, he supposedly banished COVID, blew it away, and told it to be gone. And of course, that hasn't happened. So these videos have all gone viral over the last couple of weeks.
yeah, I did a show on the Paula White,
Yeah,
uta kata, all
just
that stuff she
bizarre.
was doing. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
there's all kinds of videos that have been made, setting it to rap music and metal music, and they're just having a field day
yeah,
with that one. But
I
everything
know,
she was
and
saying is consistent with her theology. That's the whole thing. That's what I did in my show. I broke it down in terms of how it relates to this whole dominion sort of prosperity, health, and wealth gospel thing. She actually believes that Christians have dominion over the angels and that she can dispatch angels from Africa and South America to somehow overturn the election results, and whatever's decreed in heaven is also going to be, decreed on earth. And that's what her whole theological system is all about.
And didn't she, a number of years back, have an affair with Benny Hinn?
That's the allegation. Yeah, supposedly they were caught in Italy, I think it was. There's pictures of them coming out of a hotel or a B&B somewhere in Italy. They've both hushed it up, but it seems to be pretty clear that something was going on between the two of them that was inappropriate. Both of them were married at the time.
Yeah, and it was Benny Hinn started going through a divorce very shortly after that.
Yeah. Yep.
So I mean, the integrity of these people is very
Yeah.
much in question. Again, not pointing fingers. Some people, hear conversation like this and they say, "Oh, you're pointing fingers." You're no, we're
Yeah.
just
Name calling.
we're just we're just giving facts to say again, be careful who you follow. These people's integrity is very much in question. And
Well, absolutely.
I agree with what you were saying, that these evangelicals, they could 100% disagree with Donald Trump and think he's, dirt under their feet, but I think they see him as an opportunity, to, start that theocracy, the dominion theology, get it rolling. And again, very,
Well,
very
yeah,
dangerous place
it
to be.
is. Well, and there's another piece that we haven't talked about yet, and that is Christian nationalism, which is a very big part of this whole story. And that is the belief that many, many evangelicals have that America was founded as a Christian nation. The founding fathers, going back centuries ago, they founded America specifically as a Christian nation, and that we've lost our way and we need to get back to that favored status. And so they have this whole theological system that says, well, this is why they're so keen, for example, on having Amy Coney Barrett put on the Supreme Court, because they want to overturn Roe versus Wade, because in their view, abortion is a national sin. America has been judged by God, and some even say that the coronavirus is part of God's judgment on America for allowing abortion and homosexuality and all that, same-sex marriage. And if we could just overturn those things, we could get back to that favored covenant status. And that's why it's so important in this dominion theology sort of language. That's why they have to be in control, so they can overturn these laws and get America back to becoming a Christian nation again. That's the missing piece that we haven't talked about yet.
Yeah, and it's as again, it's very convenient that when something like coronavirus happens to people outside of the sect, it's the judgment of God.
Yeah.
But when it happens to someone like Donald Trump, John Hagee, who's
Yep. Greg
a,
Laurie.
a popular, Greg Laurie, then it's the devil attacking them. So
It's a
it's
spiritual
very
battle. See, they
yeah,
can spin it to whatever they. And I heard Kenneth Copeland the other day. He was going on about Trump's had a miraculous recovery because, of course, God was, in his corner, and he's now immune. And so somehow from that, all Christians are now immune from catching COVID. I mean, it's just unbelievable how they can spin these narratives, as you say. But of course, what about other countries that have had coronavirus, run rampant through? They're not Christian nations. Well, that narrative doesn't work. It only works for America. But every time there's a natural disaster, they say, see, that's God's judgment on America. Or 9/11 was God's judgment on for these sins of abortion and same-sex marriage and pornography and whatever you want to put in there. We got to get back to being a Christian nation again.
and something else that is interesting is that Donald Trump, when he was in the hospital with corona, he received remdesivir for part of his treatment,
That's
which is
true.
something that of course they I'm sure they've all had, including John Hagee and Greg Laurie. They're older gentlemen, so I'm sure they gave them, threw everything at it that they could.
Mm-hmm.
But that particular medication is made with cells from aborted fetuses. So
Yeah.
how do we weigh that in the balance?
Conveniently overlooked that, No, I didn't hear any Christian that I could see talking about that as a potential ethical problem for these guys who are like Trump. It was okay for him to have this miracle cure that was, like you say, made from harvested cells from aborted babies, you know. It's amazing the cognitive dissonance. It works on so many levels.
It does, and for the again, for the listener, don't think it's all yeah, kill those babies. I'm definitely more of a pro-life person. I don't agree with some of these people, certainly, that go out and just sleep around and then use abortion as a means of birth control. I think that's very irresponsible. I think it's terrible. But this is the world we live in at the moment. And
It is.
sometimes abortions, sometimes there's medical reasons, that the mother may not survive, or whatever the case may be. But
Hmm.
the point being, this medication is, made, partially with cells from aborted fetuses. And if we're giving it to our modern day King David and John Hagee and Greg Laurie and, other Republicans who have come down with coronavirus, what did they get a pardon for that? I mean,
Yeah.
how does that work?
Special forgiveness. Well, and I don't know how much we want to get into this, but you're talking about abortion. I had Frank Schaeffer on my show about a month ago, and if anyone has never heard of Frank Schaeffer, he's the son of a very famous evangelical, Francis Schaeffer, who back in the 60s and 70s was part of getting the original Christian right off the ground, and they used abortion as their sort of single issue topic to make it all happen. And so even that has been hugely politicized. They would say now, well, we got to overturn Roe versus Wade to return America back to a Christian nation. But the fact is, guys like Jerry Falwell and others, they knew that abortion would be the main topic to get Christians and Catholics alike to vote for their candidates, like Ronald Reagan. So the whole thing is wrapped up in politics as well. We've got to put that piece of it in there too.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of political backroom
Oh, absolutely.
manipulation and wheeling and dealing with these people. And I always found it strange, even back in the day when I was eyeball deep in that stuff, how, so many of these highly favored and sought after evangelical leaders, uh, you know, so close to politicians, they were, you know, right in there over their
Oh,
heads
sure.
with politics and politicians. And I always said, well, gee, that's a little strange. What are they so,
Mm,
buddy buddy with those guys for? And some of them, didn't have the best reputation either. So
yeah.
what's the situation with that? But
Well, look, even Billy Graham. I mean, he was kind of the prototype, the model for that, wasn't he? Going way back to, I believe it was Harry Truman. He was what was he, the pastor to presidents? He was basically the sort of spiritual advisor from Truman all the way up to, I don't know, maybe even Obama. So Billy Graham was one of those guys that was right in the White House, president after president. Didn't matter if he was Democratic or Republican. So he was kind of the prototype for blazing the trail for a lot of these guys, like you say, that ended up getting involved in politics, and they're in charge, or they think they're in charge, right now. That's why they're so upset that Trump has lost. Their ticket to the White House has just been revoked, basically.
yeah, it's bad news for
Mhm.
them, if it
For
doesn't
them.
go
But the
the
groups aren't
way
going to
they had
go
planned.
away. That's the whole point. Is the Washington D.C. is loaded with these organizations like the Family Research Council, Capital Ministries, the Council for National Policy. I mean, there's just so many of them. The Concerned Women for America, on and on and on. They've been around for decades. They're not going to go away when Trump leaves office. these groups they're not going anywhere. They're working twice as hard now that a Democrat is in office, a pro-life or pro-choice Democrat. My God, they're having a field day already with the fear mongering. Franklin Graham had a Facebook post a couple weeks ago where he just said, "Look, if Biden wins, it's all over. He's going to shut down churches and he's going to, close down the Christian schools, and it's going to be horrible and terrible." And it's like, what? The fear
I know.
mongering is just unbelievable that they're already
And
at
I
it.
heard I heard Donald Trump say once if Biden gets in, he's going to take away Christmas.
Yeah, he's going to hurt God and he's going to hurt the Bible. I love that one.
Meanwhile, meanwhile, he's a Catholic. I mean,
I
come
know
on,
he's
people.
far more religious. Of the two candidates, obviously Biden was far more of a religious person as a lifelong Catholic, you know. So it's ironic there.
But you have to think too, with a lot of these guys, and Pat Robertson, he ran for president once upon a time.
Mm-hmm.
And we've heard, Kenneth Copeland back certain candidates in the past, and even right up to like Mike Huckabee,
Yeah.
that they were all behind. And it's kind of scary because they're the first people to say, if a Democrat gets in, our rights are going to be taken away.
Mm-hmm.
But then they're the first people that if they get in power and they have their way, they're going to start taking other people's rights away.
Mm-hmm.
I've heard these people talk about, passing laws that, certain kind of books would not be able to be published and sold in America. Things that may be talked about Wicca or New Age or, alternative spiritual paths. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
you know, even making those practices, in America illegal. So the different religions or people that might be in same-sex marriages or gay, actually, uh, you know, mimicking a little bit of uh, Hitler's Nazi
Sure.
Germany.
Yeah.
People rounded up, arrested, persecuted, prosecuted, put to death even.
Mm. Well, and I think
So
we
again,
mentioned, yeah, I was going to say we mentioned a little bit in the first podcast. I talked about a guy named R.J. Rushdoony, who was the father of what's known as Christian Reconstructionism, and this guy was advocating that American civil law should be the Old Testament law, and that's where a lot of that comes from because when the Christian right was first getting off the ground, they didn't have a real theological and philosophical basis, but Rushdoony had already written all these books and so they were like, oh, this guy's already done it all. He's done all the work already. Now they didn't accept everything Rushdoony said. It was too extreme, but a lot of his stuff still has filtered through. So a lot of that stuff that you just mentioned about taking away rights and banning certain religions and things, that all goes back to Rushdoony because of course the Old Testament law would say that worship of false gods is an abomination. So a Hindu, a Sikh, a Muslim, a Buddhist, an atheist, they're all, guilty of worshiping false gods or not believing in God at all. So they need to be banned or put to death. So it's not a far stretch to see where this stuff comes from.
yeah, and it's a mighty tangled web they would weave if they have their
It is.
way.
It really
So
is.
again, I keep repeating it, in these past two shows, but be careful who you follow.
Mm,
Just because you think you're on the winning team or you want to be on the winning team, you might not be in the end because
mm.
this stuff gets weird, it gets ugly, it gets oppressive, and
Yeah.
how are we going to, or how are they going to rather justify, all of their profits if Donald Trump fails in his attempt to stay in office?
Well, they're parroting the conspiracy theory line that Trump and his crack legal team, headed up by Rudy Giuliani and some of these other people, they're going out and spreading the same exact conspiracy theories, and they're adding the whole spiritual warfare piece to it. It was a demonic attack. It was some sort of satanic thing that took the election by storm, stole the election, apparently thwarted the plans of God, which makes you wonder, how powerful is their God that he had all these plans to, see Donald Trump get reelected, and then Satan came in and stole the whole thing, through fraudulent votes and, voter software and all this, so that's the line right now that they're going with. They've been saying that there's going to be a miraculous overturned reversal, which hasn't happened, as he gets his legal challenges thrown out in state after state after state. So they're having less and less options really as to what they can say. All they can do is talk about these conspiracy theories, and they're just parroting, as I say, the same line that Trump himself is talking about.
Yeah, I heard now that after a couple of recounts that Biden is still ahead,
Yeah,
and Trump
Georgia.
was meeting. Yeah, that Trump was meeting with some heads of state, yes, Trump people, to see if they will just ignore the will of the people and just give the state to him. So, you
Yeah,
know,
it's all they can
you
do.
know, what kind of spiritual warfare and Christianity is this?
It is. Well, and
And
as you were saying, I wanted to go back to your point about, watch who you're following, because I think, sort of garden variety evangelical, let's say, sitting in that church pew in sort of any town, USA, good person, pays their taxes, works hard, is a good citizen, blah, blah, blah. They're a nice person. But who are they listening to? Because what we know now is that these big organizations like the Family Research Council or the Council for National Policy, they view churches, they're kind of like the Christians in the pew. They're sort of like foot soldiers, and they need to tell them what to do. Go out and, knock on doors and ring people up and, get these grassroots campaigns going and hand out voter guides and all that. These people on the street level, as it were, they don't necessarily know what these guys at the top, these sort of generals in this army metaphor, what they're actually believing, which is this whole dominion theology piece. So you've got to really do your research. That's where books like Catherine Stewart's The Power Worshippers, for example, is a very good resource, because she's done this research and she breaks down how they're actually doing it, church by church, state by state. They're mobilizing these sort of cells as they see it. They look at churches, they're like cells, and they have to mobilize each of these cells across various states to do their bidding politically. So there's a lot that goes on that most people they're not aware of.
yeah, man, it's definitely insane,
Hmm.
and I wanted to, when you said, how powerful is their God, that, he had these plans that this is how it was going to work out, and the devil comes in and just sweeps it all away.
Yeah.
And that's one of the that was one of the things about, evangelicalism that I found very peculiar, even when I was in it, is that it was always the devil, the devil. He was under every rock, he was around every corner. He would get you if you watch secular movies. He would get you if you
Yeah.
listen to secular music. He would get you if you read a book that wasn't Christian.
Yep.
There was a
Anything.
thousand different, yeah, a thousand different ways he could get you, and he was always, thwarting the plans of God, and there was always spiritual battle. I mean, is God that weak, or is he just that much of playing games? Well, here's what I really want to happen, but I want to see all of you, suffer and fight and bleed and have nervous
Hmm.
breakdowns to get to the finish. It just didn't make sense to me. And here we go again. Here's the old tried and true. Well, our prophecies didn't come to pass. Oh, it was the devil. It's
Yeah. It's always the devil. Well, and they're blaming the
it's
church too. I've heard a couple of these prophets say that the reason that Biden was allowed to win was that the church was asleep. That the church wasn't wake enough to get out there and vote and get active in the political sector and get people mobilized. The church was sleeping, and so God just said, well, hey, if you're going to sleep through this election, then I guess you get Biden. He's a punishment, really, for your lack of care and concern. So it's your own fault, really. So it's never their fault. Trump was supposed to win, but the church was asleep, you see. So hey, it's not our fault. It's beautiful how they can
yeah,
spin it.
it's terrible. It really is.
It is.
For
It's
me,
abusive.
for me, it's it's always made me a little bit angry because there are people out there that, are seeking, spiritual truth, or as much as they can find in this crazy world we live in.
Mm.
They're seeking comfort. They're seeking, something that will give their life a little bit of peace and meaning. And then they have to encounter this. And how many of them back away because they say, well, if that's being religious, if that's, God, I don't want any part of it because this looks like a madhouse,
Hmm.
and there's a lot of people that do that. They see these evangelicals and it just sours the whole situation for them. And then of course
Hmm.
there's many evangelicals within that end up, walking away or, having some kind of breakdown because it's just such an oppressive, mental, psychological, and even spiritual, oppression, on the
Hmm.
mind.
It is.
It's angering to me to see somebody use God in such a capacity, use religion in such a capacity to do such devious, rotten, lying, conniving things, and will not think twice about hurting other people or taking their rights away to get
Hmm.
their way.
Yeah,
It's that
and
that
keep their
definitely
money.
makes my blood boil. Yeah.
Well, yeah, we talked about religious trauma syndrome in the first podcast we did. I remember in high school, I was in a Christian high school in Seattle, and a friend of mine, his mom was dying of cancer, and they were part of a church in Seattle that was like a health and wealth gospel, the same kind of Kenneth Copeland sort of Paula White theology, where you can pray and God will miraculously heal you if you have enough faith. Well, his mom was racking herself on her deathbed, literally in agony, begging God to heal her and swearing that she had enough faith. And this pastor came along and she died. And my friend said to him, why did my mom die? She was praying. He said, well, she probably had unconfessed sin in her life or she didn't have enough faith. And he was like, look, man, she was, killing herself mentally to try to make sure she had enough faith and that she didn't have any sins, that she hadn't confessed in her life, and she still died. And he was so bitter about that. He felt very abused by this pastor who just basically threw it back on his mom. Said, well, it's her fault that she died. It wasn't God's fault. It certainly wasn't my fault. So that's the same kind of
Yeah.
talk, thinking that you've just described.
It is, and I heard a lot of that back in the day. Well, the devil got another good one. The devil won. Well, they didn't have, that's a terrible thing to say.
Yeah.
You go through your life thinking, the devil killed your loved one,
Yeah.
and God didn't heal them because they didn't have enough faith.
Yep. Or they had some kind of
You
secret
know,
sin in their life. So she's begging and praying, asking God to forgive her for every sin that she could possibly think of and things that she had forgotten about. What more do you need to do? So not only did she die in physical pain, she also died in emotional and spiritual agony as well because of this burden that this health and wealth gospel preacher had laid on her deathbed. I mean, how cruel is that? And then the son is also traumatized. Not only has he lost his mom, but he's got this whole spiritual piece that says, what the hell? You know, my mom
I
was a
know.
sinner, I guess, and God didn't care enough to heal her. And so now she's dead. So what a piece of work that guy was. But it's a very common experience, unfortunately.
It is. It definitely is.
Yeah.
There's many, 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 many stories. There was the woman who had cancer, and she had quite a bit of money. I forget her name, and she had given to Kenneth Copeland for year after year after year. Pretty much gave away all that she had, plus her children's inheritance. Thinking God was going to heal her if Kenneth Copeland would pray over her,
Hmm.
and she ended up dying. And again, I forget her name. You could look this up. The woman, who died of cancer, and her kids actually sued Kenneth Copeland Ministries. I don't know how far they got, if they got anything out of it, but she was
Hmm.
another woman that died saying, "I have faith. I've given all my life. I've sowed my seeds of faith. I've tithed. Why isn't God healing me?" And she died very, very sad, very afraid, very confused
Hmm.
because you know, Kenny Copeland didn't come through for her in the end, you know?
And neither did God. And that's the thing, is these people are putting God, if there is a God, if they're putting him in this, they're presuming that he's going to come through for them, that they're making promises that he perhaps has no intention of following through on. Like I say, if there is a God, they've made a business out of this. I mean, Copeland's worth somewhere between, they say, between 300 and 760 million dollars personally. That's how much money he's got just sitting in the bank. So he's made a good living out of this whole thing, decades of preaching this prosperity gospel, and his fingerprints are all over this Trump prophecy stuff. You look at YouTube, you look him up. He's got all these people coming on his show talking about all this stuff. So he's right in the middle of all this right now.
Yeah, he seems like a very angry, nasty dude right now. The things that I've seen some of
Yeah.
those videos. So
Well,
if
he's
you don't
yeah.
vote, you keep your mouth shut. You don't have a right to complain. It's like,
Yeah.
wow, really?
Yep. Good old Copeland. He's a real piece of work.
He definitely is.
Mm.
But anyhow, brother, our time has come to a close. I want to thank you again for being on the show. These were awesome conversations, and I hope the listening audience got something out of this and will ponder some of the things we've talked about. But before we close shop here, tell the folks where they can reach you if they want to listen to your podcasts or anything else you might have available out there for individuals that might be kind of suffering through this religious post-traumatic stress syndrome.
Mm. Well, as I said, my show is called the Mind Shift Podcast. You can find me on Twitter at MindShift 2018, or you can go on Facebook, look up the Mind Shift Podcast Facebook page. There's a bunch of different ways you can find me on social media. I would say too, yeah, there's a lot of episodes I did on religious trauma syndrome. I just had one that came out about a month ago with a guy named Andrew Jasko, who I've done a couple of shows with him before, and I've also had episodes with Marlene Winnell and Janice Selby from Canada, as well as Laura Anderson. So these are actual therapists who deal specifically with RTS. So if there's anyone who's really struggling with religious trauma syndrome, reach out to me and I'll put you in touch with some of these episodes and some of the resources that we have as part of our Facebook community sort of thing, and we can help you out. We can get you in touch with the right people that can give you the counseling or support that you need.
Yeah, you got some great shows with some great people on there, man. It
Mm.
really definitely is. I think a voice and a service that the world needs right now to understand and know, some of this stuff. So yeah, definitely check out the Mindshift podcast if you're wanting to know more or going through a tough time, because of religious oppression in your own life. Definitely some very educational and uplifting stuff. Hey, Jesus himself said the truth will set you free. So
Mm.
knowing the truth about this movement, these people, their agenda, where it all comes from, it's definitely freeing. And I wish I knew a lot of this or had a show like Mind Shift podcast to listen to when I was waking up with the cold sweats,
Yeah. Same here.
21 years ago. I had to
That's
dope
why
it
we're
out
doing it though.
myself.
That's it. I mean, I see
I hear
part of
you,
my
man.
own journey is helping other people to unpack this stuff. So, as a teacher, that's how I approach it, sort of as an academic standpoint, that I want to have experts and people on who know what they're talking about. So, that's what I do, a lot of research, I do a lot of writing. So, that's kind of my approach, is to be an educator and help people work their way through this stuff.
That's definitely awesome. But anyway, Clint, see, I got it right.
Hey, you got it right. I've been called worse.
somehow through this brain fog of fatigue, I held it
There you go.
together. But but anyway, I appreciate you being on the show, man. This is really awesome, and I think this will be a very helpful conversation for a lot of folks to listen to.
Well, thank you, Paul. I've absolutely enjoyed talking to you and getting to know you a little bit. So we'll do this again for sure.
Absolutely, brother. And for all of you out there, again, we hope you got something out of the show and it gives you some material to research and think about. and stay safe, stay well, and I'll see you next time here on the Mind's Eye Podcast.